All right, diving right in today, we're locked on to a fight everyone's talking about. Volkanovski versus Lopes. You guys sent in some really great stuff this time, some real in-depth breakdowns, some interesting interviews.
Yeah, some good analysis on recent performances.
Exactly. And what we want to do in this deep dive is go past the surface hype and really break down what makes this such a fascinating matchup and what the sources tell us we might see go down.
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out at me from all the material you've put together is just this really interesting contrast we're seeing right now between the two fighters.
Yeah, it's an odd trajectory for both of them.
You have Volkanovski, this long-reigning champ, but coming off two pretty significant knockout losses.
Yeah.
And then you have Lopez, kind of the up-and-comer, who's sensing a real opportunity here to make a huge statement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the sources do a really good job of highlighting this tension.
Let's get right into it then. Let's start with Volkanovski's recent fights. The info we have really sheds some light on those two losses. First, the Makhachev fight. It was a tight one, super close, but Makhachev just had that undeniable power and grappling advantage.
He really did.
And then the Topuria fight, that was a more decisive knockout. A lot of the sources we have point to Topuria's insane power and just how Volkanovski got caught.
That's a key distinction the sources make. I think with the Makhachev fight, while it was a loss to, an absolute beast of a fighter, it didn't necessarily raise concerns about Volkanovski's durability, his ability to take a shot.
It was more about a clash of styles.
Exactly. It was more a clash of styles. But that Topuria fight and one expert analysis you sent over really highlights this, served as a harsh reminder almost about just how dangerous the featherweight division can be.
Yeah, there's some real tower down there.
I mean, the fact that Volkanovski got finished that decisively, it raises legitimate questions about his chin moving forward, especially against these powerful strikers.
And that brings us to the big question. How does a champ, even one as mentally tough as Volkanovski, how do they bounce back from not one, but two knockout losses? The sources do mention he has a history of, bouncing back from setbacks earlier in his career.
He does, yeah.
So that's a positive sign. But as one of the fighter interviews you shared pointed out, getting knocked out, it's a whole different animal. It can really mess with you.
For sure, and that's where the analysis gets really interesting. The psychological aspect, and several sources emphasize this, is absolutely paramount. So we might see Volkanovski make some tactical adjustments. One detailed breakdown you sent actually suggested that we might see him adopt a slightly more conservative approach where he prioritizes defense and picks his shots a bit more carefully.
Yeah, so it's about finding that balance.
Yeah, it's walking that tightrope between his signature high-volume offense and minimizing the risk of getting caught again. That's a real puzzle he's got to solve.
It is. His whole game plan is usually built on relentless pressure, overwhelming his opponents. Can he really dial that back without losing that edge? And this leads us to Diego Lopes. The sources seem to agree he's got a golden opportunity here, even though he doesn't have that same one-punch knockout power as a Topuria or a Makhachev.
Right. And what's so interesting, as this one analysis you shared points out, is that Volkanovski's recent knockouts have kind of created new avenues to victory for Lopes.
Opened up some new paths.
Exactly, new path. He might not have that one-hitter quitter power, but just the fact that Volkanovski has been stopped recently, it creates kind of psychological vulnerability that Lopes can definitely try to exploit.
The crack in the armor.
Yeah, he goes in there knowing this guy can be stopped. And beyond that, the sources really highlight Lopez's well-rounded striking and, even more importantly, his ground game.
Yeah, that grappling aspect keeps coming up. The sources really point to his submission skills. He's not just looking to take you down, he's actively hunting for a finish on the mat.
Oh yeah, he's not just holding you down there.
Sure. And that presents a whole different threat to Volkanovski, who's mostly dealt with strikers lately.
For sure.
Yeah.
And if you look at several expert predictions you've included, Lopez's route to victory probably involves a two-pronged attack, right? He's going to test Volkanovski early on the feet, see if there's any hesitation, any vulnerability lingering from those knockouts.
See if there's some fear in there.
Exactly. But his biggest advantage might be his grappling. If he can get this fight into the clinch or to the ground, his Brazilian jiu-jitsu could be the key. The sources say he's really good at transitioning and finding those small openings, even if they're tiny.
All right, let's get tactical. Let's break down some key factors the sources are highlighting for us to watch for on fight night.
Let's do it.
First up, Volkanovski's defense and movement sounds like he needs to be really sharp in these areas to avoid becoming a sitting duck.
Absolutely. Several analyses really emphasize how important it is for Volkanovski to be on point defensively. We should be watching his footwork. Is he keeping his distance effectively? How's his head movement? Is he slipping punches, staying elusive? As one striking breakdown you sent over put it, even a small dip in these areas could be all a sharp striker like Lopes needs.
So he needs to tighten up that defense.
He really does.
Now, on the flip side, we have Lopez's striking power and his ability to create opportunities. He might not be a one-punch knockout artist, but the sources still paint him as a very dangerous and unpredictable striker.
Especially in the pocket.
Yeah, particularly in close.
And it's not just about raw power, right? I mean, as one fighter-turned-analyst pointed out, sometimes it's about landing a bunch of shots, those accumulating blows, or catching your opponent off balance. And the sources indicate that Lopes is really good at that, particularly in those close exchanges where his combinations and variety can overwhelm a fighter's defenses. And that, could open up takedown opportunities.
Definitely something to watch for. And then a factor that's always key but seems especially important here based on the material we have, cardio and mental toughness.
Big time.
Volkanovski has incredible cardio. It's legendary. But the sources raise a valid question. What's his mental state like coming off those 2 knockouts?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I mean, Volkanovski's conditioning is a massive asset, no doubt about it. He can go hard for 5 rounds, which you don't see often. But the mental impact of back-to-back knockouts and several psychological analyses you shared really dive into this. It can't be underestimated.
It's a tough thing to shake off.
Yeah. I mean, Lopes is going to come out strong, try to capitalize on any sense of fragility he picks up on. If Volkanovski can weather that storm, though, avoid taking too much damage early, then his cardio becomes a huge factor.
Especially as the fight goes on.
Yeah, but how's he going to react if he gets tagged early? That's the question.
That's the question. So putting all this information together, what are the main takeaways? I mean, the story of this fight is so interesting because of Volkanovski's recent losses. Lopes has a real shot here if Volkanovski isn't 100% physically or mentally.
You hit the nail on the head. This isn't just another challenger for Volkanovski. Lopes has a legitimate path to victory, and this narrative of the former champ trying to prove he's still got it adds a whole layer of drama. But if you look at the bigger picture that the sources paint, Volkanovski's experience, his striking volume, his wrestling that can neutralize Lopes's takedowns, it seems like most people are leaning towards Volkanovski, especially in a 5-round fight.
And the general consensus seems to be that we'll see a more measured but still tactical Volkanovski, using his jab to control the distance, using his footwork to stay out of the danger zone, and maybe even mixing in some wrestling to disrupt Lopes's grappling. So the sources are suggesting a Volkanovski win, possibly by decision, or maybe a late TKO if he can wear Lopes down.
But that question mark over Volkanovski's chin, it's still there. If Lopes connects cleanly, particularly early on before Volkanovski can settle into his game plan, an upset is definitely possible. That's what makes this fight so exciting.
Either guy could go down. So for you listening, the key takeaways are Alexander Volkanovski has a huge test ahead of him, physically and mentally. He's got to prove he can bounce back after those knockouts. And Diego Lopes is a serious threat. He's well-rounded, he's got some really dangerous grappling, and he's looking to capitalize on any weakness he sees in the former champ.
And this brings up a big question for you to think about. What will be the deciding factor in this fight? Will it be Volkanovski's experience, his track record, his ability to adapt? Or will it be the psychological and physical impact of those recent losses combined with Lopes's hunger? What does this tell us about confidence and vulnerability at the highest levels of the sport? It's fascinating stuff.
We hope this deep dive gave you some valuable insight into this fight. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.